Thank you. And thank you, Beth, for that kind introduction. I'm very pleased and happy to be here with an opportunity to speak to you. I'm also happy to be on a panel with two very dynamic co-panelists who are movers and shakers in their own right. And I hope we can make this evening a valuable a valuable time for you. I'm here to talk about what I call community-led clean energy. Um, I come to you and to this work both as a professional energy advocate, a clean energy advocate. I work for Renew Wisconsin as the policy director, and that's the team. That was the team as of 6 months ago. We've had one person move out and another one move in. But we have grown to 8 full-time staffers now. I'm also a member of the the Sustainable Madison Committee, which is an official body that takes the lead in formulating city policy to address sustainability matters. And in the last couple of years, we've taken a pretty aggressive plunge into the world of clean energy, developing policy for the city. The policies that are now in place basically originated with the Sustainable Madison Committee. And that's a picture of my house with solar panels all over and the solar dryer. That's what I call the clothesline. All right, so my role, as I see it, is because I am a professional clean energy advocate, I think that I'm best, my contribution should be aimed at solving problems that come with implementing policies. I've been working for Renew since 1991, and one of the most common things or frequent things I've said is renewable energy is like swimming upstream. There are just so many things. There's such a current towards the easiest, the most convenient, and the least expensive energy sources. That's no longer the case now, but we haven't quite grasp the fact that clean energy is completely mainstream now. It is the default option for customers and for utilities, as it turns out. So the problem that I see myself addressing is how to expand clean energy options for the city as expeditiously as possible. Why expeditiously? You know, the planet is in desperate straits. We need to start acting today and in a serious and ambitious and aggressive way. And so I threw in a picture of Greta Thunberg. I think whenever you run into an impasse in whatever collective endeavor you're doing, trying to come together on a clean energy project, and you're running into some resistance or some tunnel thinking or tunnel vision, just show a picture of her, and I think some of the resistance will just melt away. So, as it turns out, Wisconsin state law actually invites communities to take responsibility for their own energy actions. This is a policy that was adopted in 1994, 25 years ago, that the clean energy policy that applies to the state also applies to local governmental units. You are hereby empowered to chart your own course. That's what this energy policy allows you to do, so long as it's in accordance with state law and the options you pursue are cost-effective and technically feasible. That same policy also identified a list of energy options for local governments as well as the state. And at the top of the list is energy conservation and efficiency. But number 2 is non-combustible renewable energy resources, which are resources that we have in the state of Wisconsin within our borders. We do have wind. We do have solar. We do have hydro. We have organic products. whereas the coal that is burned in the state comes from somewhere else. Same is true with natural gas and gasoline. Well, so in the last couple of years, a number of local governments have set very ambitious renewable energy acquisition targets. In years past, they would have run into some rather discouraging economic realities regarding the price of wind and the price of solar. It was daunting, even as recently as 5 years ago. Not today. So these are two recently built renewable energy projects, and wind has come down in price by about 2/3, 66%. Solar is even more dramatic a price decrease, 85%. This I know from painful experience, because the solar system that's on my rooftop was installed in 2008. And if I install that same, or if I have installed that same system today, it would be closer to $4,000. So that since $19,000 to $4,000, that's a pretty, I felt like I had to commit to a renewable energy system to walk the talk as an advocate, but there would have been some value in waiting. Anyway, all right, so let's move into how advocacy and mapping a course of action can occur at the local level. And the way I see it, there are basically three elements that when you have all three elements in place, you have I guess the ingredients and the structure for positive and sustained action. What you need is a legislative body that wants to adopt policies that presumably benefit the environment. And in Madison, not only do we have a common council that wants to do that, but we have an official committee, the Sustainable Madison Committee, that can help them, that can review and vet, formulate and refine the resolutions and the policies to get them there. But an important part of the process is the outside community groups, the people in the community that they're not attached to the government. They're either through by elections or by because they just don't work for the government. But at the same time, they can shape opinion in the community. They can focus citizen interest and a sense of urgency, and that will get the government to act. And finally, you have administrative staff. They're the ones that are actually assigned the responsibility of carrying out the policies. But as you can see, their community groups can actually help them as well through volunteering for special projects, lending the staff the benefit of their expertise in various endeavors. So it's not all on staff to do what the city wants. Volunteers and others can help staff carry out the policy. So as you're starting out, a couple of things to take note of. One is, so what is your energy baseline? What kind of energy flows into the wires within Baraboo city limits? Is the resource any different than what flows? What goes to other Alliant Energy customers? And if there's a fair amount of local generation, that should be taken into account. But you should know where you're starting from. The renewable energy content in Alliant generated and supplied electricity is somewhere around 12%, which means 88% is coming from a combination of coal, natural gas, nuclear, and other. And often just the spot purchases on the wholesale market. So from 12 to 100%, that's a long journey. That's almost that is an octupling, in fact. But anyway, and one other thing that should be addressed from the get-go is when formulating your local goals. Should it apply to the community or just to local operations? There are pluses and minuses to doing both, but in the case of directing the local government, that's something that the government can control. They can control the purchasing of energy for their fleets and for their buildings. And they don't have the same kind of control over what citizens do, how they source their energy. But on the other hand, for 100% renewable to mean something, the community has to get involved. So what we look at is the concept of leading by example, local governments taking the lead, showing businesses, showing residents that here are certain things you can do. Here are the things that we're doing. Hopefully what we're doing is actually resulting in savings as well as an improvement in the environment. So the city of Madison adopted a 100% goal back in 2017. We did not at that time set a deadline. We decided to hire a consultant to provide some options and come up with enough analysis so we can choose the level of aggressiveness in the pathway. So we looked at, can we do this by 2040? Can we do this by 2030? Can we do this by 2050? Or 2025? We landed on 2030, but we didn't land on that date until this year. One last point. When we say 100% renewable, we're not just talking about electricity. We're also talking about transportation and building heating and cooling. That's really important. And if you do proceed down this path, you will soon discover that going 100% renewable on electricity is the easy part compared with transportation and heating and cooling. But just to give you a little warning. So, and one other thing, in the state of Wisconsin, electricity is a utility monopoly service. You can only buy your electricity through the grid from one entity. In this case, in the case of Baraboo, it is Alliant. I presume you're all Alliant Energy customers. So, I mean, there's this lovely wind farm about 50 miles away in Dodge County. Can Baraboo strike up a conversation with the owner of that wind farm and start saying, hey, can we have some of that electricity? No, you cannot. You have to work through the utility, or else put renewable energy, plug it directly into your facilities. But there are renewable energy options available to reach 100%. So you can put solar on your rooftops, for example, or if your utility offers it, and Alliant is just now starting to implement this service, off-site generation, like meaning a solar array maybe 5 miles from Baraboo, but that array would be dedicated to Baraboo government facilities. That's legal now in the state of Wisconsin. And then we'll talk about the other there is procuring what's called renewable energy certificates from a new source. Now, the common word in all three of those pathways is new. You want new generation. You want the generation to offset what is already in place. So it's critically important that whatever path you choose, whatever project you think will get the biggest bang for the buck in the most cost-effective manner, that you are leveraging new generation and not just simply redistributing what is already out there. All right, so let's talk about say putting and I'm just throwing these words out, putting a 50 kilowatt solar system on the courthouse. So you probably have a really strong bond rating. Of course, you do that, and well, actually say Baraboo City Hall. You would save on the cost of electricity because you're buying less from the utility. You can even integrate that with job training, which the city of Madison does. But there is an Achilles heel with local government ownership of a solar, which is you're not a taxable entity. You don't pay taxes. Cities, counties, school districts, they do not pay taxes, which means they're not eligible for federal tax incentives. And the other challenge is because of the way utility tariffs are structured, you can never put as much renewable electric capacity on your property to offset your entire load. It has to be, unfortunately, a percentage of it, and what that percentage is depends heavily on the net metering service, which in Alliant territory is not very good. It's capped at 20 kilowatts. So that's a serious hurdle towards your goal of 100%. But it's not stopping every community from taking action. And Beaver Dam is putting solar on its rooftops. The city of Ashland, wastewater treatment plants in Bayfield County are doing that. City of Madison, city of Milwaukee. Lots of local governments are pursuing renewable energy in this way. But to figure out what's best for Baraboo and any other city involves thinking about all these variables that influence the economic proposition or the value proposition behind the investment, such as net metering terms of service, electric use profile at your facility. Is it a big user or a small user? It matters. Roof orientations, and is your roof in need of repair? Solar might not be such a great idea on a roof that's going to be repaired in the next 5 years. Tax status of the host and availability of financing options. Unfortunately, in Wisconsin, we don't have resolution or clarity on how you can finance a solar system. You can't lease a solar system in Wisconsin the same way you can lease an automobile. That is a serious impediment to this, especially to nonprofits that are tax disadvantaged because they are nonprofits. However, Sauk County actually pursued third-party financing, and so there are now two very large systems in Sauk County, one on the nursing home in Reedsburg and the other on basically your jail here in Baraboo. And these are complicated transactions that involved a third party. It was kind of gutsy on the part of Sauk County to pursue solar this way, but in the end, Alliant did not challenge the installation, so they went forward, and now you have close to 2/3 of a megawatt of solar serving county facilities. So this is an option, but proceed at your own risk. So the city of Madison has stuck to owning all of the solar systems that is serving the city facilities. There are now, I believe, 28 solar facilities in Madison, and close to 2/3 of a megawatt there. On fire stations, at municipal wells, on the city libraries, and other engineering facilities, sanitation buildings, what have you. The city has a goal of 1 megawatt of solar, and it integrates this approach with a job training component to introduce at-risk youth to working on solar projects, learning the basics of a 9-to-5 job, and learning something that can be taken to one of the other solar businesses in Madison when the apprenticeship is through. serious limitation, though, on behind-the-meter solar is, Madison consumes about 53 million kilowatt hours a year of electricity. A one megawatt will generate 1.2 million kilowatt hours of electricity. So you subtract the smaller number from the larger number, and you still need 51,800,000 kilowatt hours a year to get to 100%. So that pathway is not going to get anywhere near the ultimate goal. So we have to think about other options. So this is a presentation I gave to the Sustainable Madison Committee about a year and a half ago, in which I introduced, with the help of the facilities director at the time, the concept of buying renewable energy certificates to leverage new solar in that'll serve the city, that can produce not 1 million kilowatt hours, not 5 million kilowatt hours, but close to 20 million kilowatt hours. So these are called renewable energy certificates, and this is, the definition is up there. It's basically thinking of the renewableness of the generation, and being able to separate that from the electricity. So the electricity just becomes plain vanilla electricity, but the renewable attributes of that electricity can be transferred. And if you structure the arrangement correctly, you can actually finance new generation, new solar arrays around the state of Wisconsin. One of the problems we have in Madison is we don't have a lot of land to host solar. We have to look outside the city borders to find those locations, but it doesn't take very long before we're outside of Madison Gas and Electric territory. And so we run into further complications if we think about moving that electricity from, say, a location like Elroy or New Lisbon, all the way down to Madison. It gets expensive to doing it this way. But what if you could just separate the renewable attributes and have it contractually come to the city of Madison? That's what we attempted to do here with an independent developer called One Energy Renewables. We had lined up 5 municipal electric utilities in western Wisconsin to purchase the plain vanilla electricity. The price they were willing to pay for that electricity was about 90% of what was needed to build those projects. So enter the city of Madison. The city of Madison says, we will buy the renewable energy attributes if you let us. The utilities were fine with that. They didn't particularly care whether this was renewable electricity or not. So, and then we passed a resolution committing ourselves to purchase those RECs, 25 years worth of RECs. With that resolution in place, we were able to leverage the construction of that facility. That facility is on the just south of Elroy, but still attached to their municipal utility. It just started operating at the end of August. The resolution that we adopted happened just a year before. Construction on this project began in January. So look what can happen. In the span of 8 months, we now have 3 megawatts of solar there. We can do this sort of thing because it's very easy to track and trade and verify these so-called attributes. This is actually a mature market. This happens all the time. Most of the corporations that commit to renewable electricity, 50% or 100%, they are acquiring that renewable electricity this way. So why can't local governments do the same thing? All right, but as I mentioned before, when I harped on the word new, additionality is key, because you don't want to be reshuffling the deck that already exists. You want to add cards to that deck. So if you construct the contract as a forward purchase, then the developer can say, but for this contract, I would not even be able to build this solar project. Well, we built 5, New Lisbon, Elroy, Cumberland, Fenimore, and Argyle, and we get to keep the credits. So we get to apply all that generation to our current consumption. And how much is that? It's about 37%. We were able to leapfrog from where we are today, which is about 10%, up to about 50% by virtue of this arrangement. So it is certainly the quickest way to acquire a lot of renewables, a lot of renewable capacity. If we care about this sort of thing, it does support Wisconsin, rural Wisconsin communities. The projects happen there. It's a very cost-effective arrangement. It's a small cost relative to the cost of electricity. So we added a thin layer of expense to our electricity cost. But if we apply ourselves to saving energy, we can offset that price tag. So basically going back to square one. And I want to emphasize the point that conservation is great. It puts money in your pocket, and as well as using less of that electricity. But if you want to change the resource mix of your utility, you have to reinvest that savings into something like solar and wind, and then you're actually getting you're actually changing the resource mix and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So last thoughts. I was privileged to be part of on these celebrations. I've been to a lot of ribbon cuttings this year. The momentum is building for these projects. On the right, it's Dane County Executive Joe Parisi cutting the ribbon on a new renewable natural gas operation at the Dane County landfill. Which is very exciting. It's one of the first forays into the heating world that I was talking about. And then on the left is a couple of solar systems in a distressed neighborhood in Milwaukee. But in both cases, in every case involving a local government investing in a renewable project, they made it happen. The community was involved. It's a great way to sort of cement the bond that this fighting climate change and building up a clean energy infrastructure are valuable pursuits. It's going to become even more valuable in the future, it's easier to pull this off at the local government level than it is at any higher level of government. So take advantage of the fact that your elected officials, they know you. You can actually achieve a lot of progress this way. Thank you.
I have a question. So how many acres of land would it take to build a solar array to generate a megawatt of power?
About 7 acres.
7 acres per megawatt.
Yep, that's the general rule of thumb these days.
Is that for solar and wind or just solar?
That's just solar.
What about wind?
Basically, a wind turbine takes up about an acre. Slightly more than an acre and a half. That's all.
So how many wind turbines do you need to get your 1 kilowatt of energy? How many turbines?
Oh, well, these days, a turbine that is providing electricity to a utility, they're more than a megawatt, just one of them. In fact, they're now more than 2 megawatts in capacity. They're very powerful machines.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, awesome. So again, my name is Stacie Reece. I'm the Sustainability Program Coordinator for the City of Madison. And I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of the City of Madison and sustainability, and cover some of the stuff. I'll briefly cover some of the stuff that Michael already touched on, and then I'm going to pivot back to the Baraboo communities. So to begin our journey, back in 2005, the City of Madison adopted the Natural Step Sustainability Framework. And that made us one of the many eco-municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. We're amongst friends in the room because the city of Baraboo is also an eco-municipality, as well as the city of Eau Claire. And that's important because one of the force system conditions of the Natural Step Framework is about reducing your reliance on fossil fuels. So that's already in the books in the city of Baraboo. I'm talking a little bit about pledges and community partnerships. In 2007, the City of Madison had an empowering campaign where we asked members of our community and businesses to take a pledge to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We had about 4,000 individuals and over 40 businesses that took that pledge. And then they came back to the city and said, okay, so how do we do this? And so the City of Madison, with the partners that you see up there, went back to the drawing board and developed a program called the Empower Business Champions Program. And that program has been running for over a decade, and that's actually where I was prior to the City of Madison, is working at Sustain Day, the local nonprofit who administered that program, working with businesses to become more sustainable. And as I was pulling this slide together, I realized that the picture I grabbed, I'm wearing the same shirt. So that was 2017, not 2007. So just to be clear. So kind of shifting back to internal work with the City of Madison, before the Sustainable Madison Committee was the Sustainable Madison Committee, it was actually a committee developed in order to create the sustainability plan for the City of Madison. That was formally adopted in 2012. And as you can see from this slide, it covers a wide array of sustainability topics, from anything from arts and culture to transportation to energy to economic development, natural systems. But today I'm going to just dive in a little deeper on energy and carbon, because that's where our Sustainable Madison Committee actually pivoted as of the last 5 years. In the sustainability plan that was adopted in 2012, we had some goals around carbon and energy. So 80% reduction by 2050 and obtaining all of our energy sources by 25% renewables by 2025. However, about 5 years ago, some things had shifted, not only with the technology of renewables going down in price significantly, but also a lot of reports that were coming out that were urgent in nature. Thinking a little bit about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, saying that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 45% within almost the next decade. And so that really gave the Sustainable Committee a reason to go back to those goals that we had set in 2012 and readdress those goals. And so that's when the committee drafted the resolution to set the goal for 100% renewable in 2017 without a date, so that we could hire a consulting firm to help us develop a roadmap on how we can get there. And really the three main buckets that I'm just going to cover briefly with the City of Madison, which we had already been doing for the last 10 years, but we're going to be now accelerating with this 100% Renewable Madison report, is around energy efficiency, renewable energy, and transportation. So just to kind of touch a little bit on our energy efficiency work, we have a resolution that states that all new buildings and major reconstructions need to be LEED certified at a minimum of silver. We also have a dedicated fund in our capital budget for energy efficiency projects. And that picture right there is of our Madison Municipal building. So a historic building that we recently renovated, and we were able to cut back on energy use, both electricity and gas usage, by almost 50%. And that's with some just basic building envelope and LED retrofits and sealing of the windows. So not a lot of really high-tech stuff in order to get this historic building more efficient. And Michael mentioned some of the renewable energy things that we're working on. So we have a dedicated fund in our capital budget that funds our rooftop solar, behind-the-meter rooftop solar installations. And that is done through our Green Power program, which is the trainee program for underrepresented members of our community to learn the trade of solar installation. That fund also is dedicated to the Madison program. That program offers residential, business, and nonprofit incentives for installing solar, and that's actually with a partnership with Renew Wisconsin. That fund also is the fund that is dedicated to the purchase of those renewable energy credits that we will have for the next 25 years through that contract. And then also with transportation, we're doing a lot with our own fleet of vehicles. We have about 1,400 vehicles that we manage as a city. So looking at electrifying our fleet, we're also looking at alternative fuels such as biofuels, renewable biofuel. We are also looking at, again, the compressed natural gas, but also the renewable natural gas that Dane County is capturing off the landfill. We're doing some other fun things such as anti-idling technology. Just thinking a little bit about, ambulance workers that need to idle to keep their air conditioning working while they have somebody in the back. So now that I've talked a little bit about what the city of Madison is doing, I'm going to pivot now to the city of Baraboo. So like Michael said, the city of Baraboo is in Alliant territory, and Alliant has some top 10 tips that you can start doing as of today to reduce your energy consumption. Also, the utility Alliant, and as well as almost all the utilities in the state of Wisconsin, all pay into an energy efficiency fund called Focus on Energy. So if you are a rate-paying customer of Alliant, there's a little line item on your utility bill that goes to the utility, which then goes to this fund that the state has. And this energy efficiency fund is for rebates and incentives to do energy efficiency programs and projects. And what I have on the left-hand side here is a picture of what I call the free box. So who here likes free things, right? So you can just enter in your utility account number, and they will deliver a box of LEDs, smart strips, low-flow shower heads directly to your door, free. So I highly recommend checking it out. Also on the Alliant website, they have a link to Focus on Energy's home assessment that you can get. So you can have someone come into your home and take a look at it, check it out to see what sort of improvements can be made, and then Focus on Energy can offer incentives and rebates for some of those applications. As far as renewable energy goes, Alliant Energy has a community solar project. So that's where they have a solar array in Iowa that you can purchase shares, or if you want to say a portion of that solar array. I believe it's a $25 application fee and $300 per share, up to 100% of your energy use that can be dedicated from this solar array. And they also have what's called Second Nature. And that's where on your utility bill, you pay a slight premium for how much energy you use, and you can allocate a certain percentage of your energy use that will be dedicated renewables towards your usage on your bill. And then also, Michael mentioned before, he showed his house with his own rooftop solar installation, as well as mentioning the costs of solar going down significantly over the past few years. And on Renew Wisconsin's website, you can go ahead and check out some of their members, some of the solar developers that are members of Renew Wisconsin, and you can get your own solar assessment at your own residence or business to do the rooftop behind the meter solar.
And one of them is in this room.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. All Sky Energy back there.
Yay. Thanks. And then that last bucket I was talking about, again, was transportation. There's information on the Alliant website about if you're interested in purchasing an EV, there are some federal tax rebates out there. Also, Alliant offers a rebate for installing a charging station at your residency. And that's something that also is coming down in price quite a bit and becoming more affordable. And I'd be remiss not to mention, because I try as much as possible, weather conditions permitting, to be a cyclist commuter to work. And if you ever check out the Google directions, you can actually select a bicycle. I kind of have an arrow pointed to it right there. You can select a bicycle and find the most applicable bicycle route from one point to another. And the last piece I'm going to talk about, and this is in the 100% Renewable Madison report, is again this kind of idea of what can you do to participate in this movement to go 100% renewable, net zero carbon. And this list kind of addresses what we've kind of already mentioned. So energy efficiency measures, doing maybe an LED retrofit at your location, looking at renewable energy options that are out there, looking also for those low carbon to no carbon transportation options. But those three arrows on there, I think, are doubly important. I think individual action is important. We all are in this together, right? Climate change doesn't care whose carbon it is. But at the same time, I believe collective action is going to be the game changer. And some of these arrows are call or email your alder to let them know you support 100% renewable for your city. It says also vote for elected leaders that support clean energy policy. And when I say that, that's from local to state to federal, because a lot of the challenges that might come up during the Q&A that I run into at a municipality level is some roadblocks at the state and federal level. And less supporting organizations that support and lobby for renewable energy policies, as Renewable Wisconsin does for the state of Wisconsin. But again, your elected leaders are really here to help move things forward, and we're fortunate for the city of Madison that we have support from the mayor and our alders to do some of the work that we're doing to accelerate our journey to 100% renewable and net zero carbon. And with that, I will pass it on to an elected leader.
How about one question while I...
Oh, sure. I'll take one. Yeah.
All right, so we have a landfill. Most every county has at least one big landfill. You mentioned the gas collection, natural gas collection from the Madison landfill, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
How is that a very difficult thing to get going? Does that have to be done by the county? Also, we have biogas digesters. Every city has one. Madison has several. Baraboos got a couple of them. We're harvesting the methane from our own waste. We know that they capture it to reheat and condition the sludge that's in those things, so there's a lot of excess stuff that just burns off. So how can we go about convincing them, and is it feasible economically to capture that and start generating electricity or collecting gas or other things?
Yeah, so the question was about landfills and digesters and basically the methane or gas markets. And it's actually a really, really exciting time for the gas markets right now. So previously, a lot of digesters or landfills that were capturing their methane were feeding them into generators that would create electricity, and they were selling it back onto the grid. Those markets have changed significantly, where prior some digesters were getting about 12 cents per kilowatt hour for that energy, and now if they were to read up their contracts, it'd be about 2 to 3 cents. So a lot lower. At the same time that was happening, what we're seeing kind of nationwide, specifically with the state of California, are low fuel emission standards for vehicles. So Dane County actually created a facility where they were doing the same thing. They were capturing that methane from the landfill and putting it into a generator to create electricity. They kind of saw on the horizon this new market. So they actually built a facility to take that same methane, clean and compress it, and inject it into interstate pipeline. So they're not only selling that gas on the interstate markets, but then they're also receiving these renewable fuel credits, very similar to the renewable energy credits that Michael just discussed. And this $29 million facility will be paid off in less than 4 years. Yes. Dane County Executive Parisi has called it a gold rush. And now a lot of the digesters in Dane County are looking at similarly cleaning, compressing their methane from the digestion of the manure so that they can participate in the same market. And not only is it going to help, these digesters, but it's also going to help with water quality issues because we think it's going to spur the building of more digesters. And actually, the city of Madison received a grant from the EPA to do a feasibility study for a digester for food scraps. So we can divert food scraps from the landfill, digest it, and then participate in that same market and pay for that facility. So it's an exciting time. Got to hit on the policy piece of things. So there actually is a bill at the federal level that Rep. Ron Kind has put on the table to re-up the federal tax credit for building digesters. And that was a previous federal tax credit that sunset in 2016, and they'd like to bring it back again to just really spur the building of those digesters, capture that methane, fuel vehicles with it instead of fueling it with gasoline or petroleum products from the Middle East. And then we can all benefit from that as well as the water quality issue. So that's kind of the gas in a nutshell market.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Beaton. I am a city council member from Eau Claire, as well as the Western organizer for Wisconsin Conservation Voters. So I actually work on municipal level clean energy policy, wearing both hats. So I'll kind of wear both of those hats as I'm talking to you. So I also have to say that I am coming from the climate strike on Friday, and so you caught me at an extra inspired time. So I don't know about you, but I'm feeling really good about the clean energy movement. It's a great time to be here and to be talking to you all about it. So I firmly believe that Wisconsin's clean energy future starts at the local level. As a young person, I'm 27. I was elected when I was 24. As a young person, I sat frustrated with a lack of action. You know, some things were happening, but I, for the most part, saw a lack of action at the national and state level. And I started to think about what we could do on the local level, saw what Madison was doing, and really hit the ground running. Eau Claire in 2018 passed a 100% renewable energy goal by 2050. So I'll kind of, that's our kind of major victory that we've had in recent years. And I'll kind of step back and tell you about the steps that got us there. I don't feel like I have to tell this room why climate change is such a problem. I often, when I'm talking about climate change, I often talk about it, how it affects me and how it affects me emotionally, right? But in this room where we're trying to learn about how to kind of move forward from a strategic standpoint, I often will kind of think about it in terms of a financial impact. And as a city council member, I think about all the time how climate change impacts our city budget. Actually, the city of Eau Claire just a couple of days ago had a pretty severe isolated storm. There were some tornadoes that touched down, and we deployed resources to, like, emergency resources to help folks who are being impacted by that. As climate change worsens, we know that that's going to be an impact for the state of Wisconsin, more severe storms, more flooding, and from a municipal standpoint, that's going to cost our cities a lot more money than what they're used to spending. It costs our public infrastructure, that those increased demand for services. It costs people who are living in our cities from a representative standpoint. That's a concern for me. It costs our tourism industry and our farming industry, and perpetuates poverty and our social issues, which also taxes our resources on a municipal level too. So there's a real reason for local communities to be thinking about how they can do their part to address climate change. So in Eau Claire, our sustainability journey really started in 2007 when our city manager heard calls from people all across the city to really look at what we can do more. He heard from one particularly compelling speaker in the community, and something sparked, and he really hit the ground running with that. And in 2008, they committed to 25% renewable energy by 2025. Now, since then, Eau Claire has reached the 25% mark for electricity. We're doing not so good on the fuel side of things, but so we're already kind of starting to reach that goal. I have a kind of a printed out timeline of the city of Eau Claire's major steps that we took, along with some key points that just came out of my brain. They're not anything official, but just things that I've observed, as well as some major hurdles that we overcame or are working to overcome. And so anyway, then in 2014, a big milestone was the creation of the Advisory Committee on Sustainability. It's much like the Yes. Okay. The Sustainable Madison Committee, and it's an official committee of the city that advises on policy and works on the ground to implement some of those policies. And then in 2017 was a real turning point for our clean energy journey. It was when the president announced that he would be withdrawing our country from the Paris Climate Accord. And in a time when I was feeling like there already wasn't enough happening, that was something that was really scary to me. And so we as a city committed to the Paris Climate Accord and directed our sustainability committee to really study that and figure out what that meant for a local community. it's an international document, of course, and so our local experts studied that and also conducted a public survey within the community, and found that nearly 3/4 of people in Eau Claire supported more aggressive moves towards clean energy. And so when the Sustainability Committee brought a resolution to the City Council to recommend 100% renewable energy commitment by 2050, that public support survey, made it possible for our City Council to pass unanimously, among a very politically mixed council, pass unanimously this commitment to 100% renewable energy. So our goal is set. It was in 2018. We were just behind Madison. We are the second city in Wisconsin to make that commitment. And now throughout 2019, we are fortunate enough to have a grant from the Public Service Commission to create a renewable energy action plan. The plan is being created by a group of community members who are from different sectors, the environmental kind of sector, from the nonprofit sector, from the social services sector, labor, the utilities, kind of all stakeholders coming together. There's like 50 or 60 people that come to these meetings and talk about what kind of policies we could be recommending to the City Council as our roadmap to eventually reach 100% renewable energy. I should mention that our goal is both for the city operations, so our city's fleet and how we power our buildings and so forth, but also private energy usage. So the City of Eau Claire committed to implementing policies that facilitate clean energy, the transition to clean energy for private people as well. And so a big part of that is working with Xcel Energy, which is our utility provider, which is actually leading the creation of the Renewable Energy Action Plan, along with the city and some other stakeholders, major stakeholders. Now, the Renewable Energy Action Plan, it's not finished yet, so I unfortunately can't show you. I didn't bring it with me. But in it, there's going to be policies that both focus on converting our energy to clean energy. That's going to be about half of it. But also about half of it, we're assuming that we have to cut our energy usage in half in order to reach that goal. Lowering the amount of energy that we're using by half in order to eventually reach 100% renewable energy. So in this journey, there are a couple things that I've learned. I've given up on the expectation that we're going to know exactly how we're going to get to 100% renewable energy. In fact, Xcel Energy, our utility provider, made a commitment to 100% carbon-free electricity. So it's a little bit different, but carbon-free electricity by 2050. And even they only have a plan to get to 80%. They're putting their faith in the progression of technology to get them there, the rest of the 20%. And so for me, as a city council member and somebody who's going to have to start to work to actually achieve this goal, I just need to put my faith in that progression of technology. I think it's really important that we don't get held up by that and prevent us from starting that race before we can really visualize the finish line. I think that's something that really is easy to get caught up in and will just stop you from doing anything. And the point is to do something, right? The other learning point, and this one is really big and something that I'm encountering in other communities and might be something to really look at first in Baraboo, is data tracking and data collection for energy usage is really essential. The City of Eau Claire started collecting our data in 2009, and so we're 10 years in now. And a lot of the fact that we had the data and we knew where we are and where we had to go in order to reach 100% renewable energy made it a lot easier for the City Council to conceptualize these goals. A lot of in my job with Wisconsin Conservation Voters, we're working with other communities now to ask them to also pass these goals. And that's the main thing that's holding city councils across the state up, is that lack of data collection. Not all communities are doing that yet. It can be kind of time consuming and expensive, but it is a really important first step. We in Eau Claire have dedicated municipal staff as well to sustainability. We have a planner who's about 3/4 of his time is spent on sustainability. So that's something that we've been really fortunate to have. I do think that a committee, like a committee of volunteers, or even just an organization within the community, or a group of passionate environmental activists can do the work to make up for that if there's no dedicated staff in a community. Because I know not all communities can have those resources for that. I will say we are very fortunate also in Eau Claire to have an energy utility that's so cooperative. Xcel Energy was the first utility company in the United States to make a commitment to 100% carbon-free electricity. We heard that there's between Xcel Energy and Alliant and even some of the other energy utilities just here in Wisconsin, there's a lot of variation between how cooperative they'll be, and so that's one hurdle that might come up. But I think that by building relationships within that, kind of the leaders of those utilities can be helpful. But I think more than anything else, the customers of that utility, showing them that they expect a move in their market towards clean energy can be really powerful. I've had the opportunity to ask Xcel Energy and the CEO why they made this shift to carbon-free electricity, and he said unequivocally it was because their customers expected it, and they're there to serve their customers. So hopefully we can do that for more utilities across the state. There is more funding for a Renewable Energy Action Plan through the Public Service Commission, so also something to think about for Baraboo here. I think a planning process is important in setting those goals and then figuring out how you're going to reach them. And so the Public Service Commission has funding to help with that. And I will say that, lastly, a big resounding kind of message that I've gotten from this whole process is that this municipal clean energy action is really a movement that's much larger than Eau Claire or Madison or Baraboo. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our impact, our 70,000 people up in Eau Claire, and our impact that we're making. And how much that really can do. But when you look at it, the Sierra Club has some data that show that actually 25% of all Americans right now are living in cities that have made this commitment. And so we are adding to a movement where local communities are saying, the federal government and the state and some state governments, you're not doing enough, and we're gonna stop waiting for you. We're gonna do what we can on the local level, because it's now or never, right? So some early consequences, early wins for us in Eau Claire from our clean energy commitment. Like I said, our plan is not completed yet, so there's actually been no policies passed yet for our clean energy goals. I would say we're kind of in that middle range as far as progress goes right now. But we have seen early capital improvement dollars allocated. $3.3 million have been allocated over the next 5 years for clean energy infrastructure in Eau Claire. That only happened because we sent a signal that we mean business in Eau Claire, that we really mean when we say we want to reach 100%, we want to reach 100%, and so we better start putting our dollars towards that. There's been a shift in municipal staff culture, so I've noticed that everything that they do now, there's a lens of how can what are little things that we can add into this project to help to reach those 100% clean energy goals. It's signaling to the utility that their customers support a transition to clean energy. So the more communities within service territories that make this commitment, it really sends a strong signal to energy utilities. And it's signaling to our legislators that their constituents support it too. And so it's my hope. I know that while we can do a lot on the local level, and while that our transition to clean energy, I believe, starts on the local level, we can't get there without the state government and the federal government. And so this signal to the legislature is really important. I also want to mention, too, that the local communities are so are advantaged to be working on clean energy, because clean energy itself, I believe, is a nonpartisan issue. Climate change, as we know, is still highly divided. There are a lot of partisan feelings about climate change, but there are a lot of reasons for people, Democrats and Republicans, to be interested in a clean energy future. Some of them are climate change concerns over climate change. Some of them are just looking at the financial benefits that we've already heard about. It's financially smart to pursue clean energy. Some of them are national defense concerns. I've talked to Republican legislators who are veterans who are really interested in clean energy because they've seen what our dirty energy economy has, the issues that they've created abroad, right? There are conservative energy groups that are popping up and advocating for clean energy all the time. There's national polling that has shown that Americans support clean energy, and our survey in Eau Claire also confirmed that too. So I'll say, obviously, local communities are nonpartisan, and so we were able to pass our goals on the city council unanimously, even though there was a pretty wide range of ideologies on the city council. So that definitely showed through practice when we were working on a nonpartisan board. I've said a couple times that I'm disappointed in the state and federal government, but I do want to give some props to a couple of state actions that have happened recently to support a clean energy future. Governor Evers proposed a 100% goal in his budget. That goal was taken out by the Joint Finance Committee, but he did achieve that in an executive order. So our state currently does have a goal of 100%. I think it's clean energy by 2050. Is that right? Yeah. Same thing with Governor Evers proposed an Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. It was removed by the Joint Finance Committee in the budget process, but he created it in the executive order. There's some energy that he proposed for renewable, or there's some money that he proposed for renewable energy. We have not seen that be returned yet, but hopefully we'll see that come forward. And Governor Evers joined the Governor's Climate Alliance. So there are some measures that are being taken to promote clean energy statewide. I would say action in the legislature is still stagnant. There's less of an agreement, a nonpartisan agreement over clean energy in the legislature now. I guess to that note, I'll skip to the end of this slide, that it's as important as ever to be electing clean energy leaders. Our organization, Wisconsin Conservation Voters, is nonpartisan, and so we advocate for and we endorse Democrats and Republicans. In the case of Governor Evers, it was a clear choice that he was the conservation candidate, and he has really lived up to that, as we saw in the previous slide. But it's important to be electing conservation and clean energy leaders on the local level too. We have done that in the city of Eau Claire. I was a conservation candidate and have gone on to work on conservation policy. And so, we're going to need to elect people who care about climate change, care about our future and the future of next generations in order to really get policy change to happen. As far as next steps in Eau Claire, we're going to be finishing up the climate action plan. I believe, I haven't seen it yet, but I believe it could serve as a framework for similarly sized communities. I'd be happy to share that with the organizers of this event once it's completed. It's supposed to be done before the end of the year. Who knows? We'll see. And then Wisconsin Conservation Voters is actually working with Renew and Sierra Club on a clean energy toolkit as an extra resource for local communities who want to be working on clean energy projects, municipal clean energy projects. And that's also supposed to be done before the end of the year. I'm told November. We'll see too. Yeah, we can send that to the event organizers as well. Last thing I'll say, I didn't plan this, but since this event has been so amazingly oriented around action. I have a couple of things that I want to suggest, some things that you guys can do moving forward. First and foremost, the more conversations that that the people in this room can have with the people outside of this room can have, the better. I come to these rooms all the time and I hear people say like, well, we're just preaching to the choir. And I actually think that this room, the people in this room are meant to hear these messages and go and be the messengers out to the community. The things that you learn in these rooms need to be repeated. And I think that through the people that we know and through the relationships that we have and the rapport that we have with people, we can start to change people's minds. We can talk to people about how we really feel about climate change. I, as a young person, am concerned about having a child one day, bringing a child into the world where we have an uncertain future. I've always had a dream of living at a lake or having a lake home, like a family lake home. And I'm not sure that's going to be possible anymore in my future. And so sharing stories like that, we all have stories about how climate change is going to impact our lives. And if we can combine that with the facts that we hear today, I think that we can really start to change people's minds. So that's your first task. Your second task is to start building relationships with your city council member. They are so accessible. I started when I was a student, and they love to talk to you. I love to talk to my constituents. Those relationships can really mean a lot when you're ready to ask them to support a climate policy on the local level. So leave this room, make a coffee meeting with your local city council members. Third thing, ask a climate leader to run for city council or run yourself. It's a big job, but it's not that hard, and I think that you can do it, and we need folks on the local level to be running. It really makes a big difference. We've seen how big of a difference it makes in Eau Claire, and I think it can make a big difference here. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I have a question about just solar capacity on rooftops. In many towns and cities, there's acres and acres of rooftops that could be utilized for solar, but my understanding is that a lot of that is kind of off limits. Could one of you speak to that just briefly, and kind of barriers to more rooftop rather than utilizing natural lands or places that could be used for agriculture or other things being dedicated to solar panels?
Sure. So the question was, can we make more efficient use of rooftops and other man-made structures for hosting solar? And the answer is, well, there are limiting factors to consider. So not every roof is appropriate for solar generation. For example, a roof that is shaded, a roof in which the occupant of that building does not own that building. So when you work your way through the rooftops, let's say in the city of Madison, you'll find that maybe 1 out of every 5 households or residences can actually have solar for one reason or another. And it's basically because of either physical constraints or engineering problems with the structural integrity of the roof, and or they don't have control of the property. They don't own it. So, and then there's the question of how much can you put up there if you did have a clear path towards installing solar on a rooftop. And there, the nature of your electric service basically controls the value proposition of that solar system. Some utilities allow excess or surplus production to be carried over the course of a year, which is great because then you can actually come close to offsetting your annual usage from solar. But if the utility doesn't let you carry over that surplus from one month to the next, such as Alliant, What you get instead is a much smaller system as compared with your overall energy use. So that's a limiting factor that will result in solar being placed on the ground as well as on rooftops. I do want to say something about solar on farms. Most of the farmers in the state of Wisconsin now are in a somewhat untenable position financially. They're looking for ways in which they can hold on to their properties and maintain their operations and pass down that property to their children and grandchildren. In looking at the value proposition of solar, one of the things that I think is underappreciated about solar in agricultural areas is that it's actually a road or a pathway to improving soil productivity, because you're not driving tractors through it or dumping fertilizer on that land. That land is allowed to regenerate, and especially with solar farms where perennials and prairie grasses are planted underneath and in between the arrays, that result in a general improvement in soil health and tilth. It's actually, I think of solar on a farm as kind of a different approach to conservation reserve, because in the end, when the solar array is no longer economic or it's on its last legs, you have a very productive piece of very productive unit of farmland waiting for you if you wanted to. So it's kind of a restoration process as well.
And I just want to quickly add, just because this is sort of my year arise, really to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. So the city of Madison, we started installing rooftop solar 2007. We've been doing, as much as we can every year, spending money to install that solar. We have 28 projects total. We're under a megawatt, hopefully to get to 1 megawatt next year. And it's like 1%. Like, we really need utility scale solar, because what we're doing is we're replacing utility scale fossil. And those large plants already exist and they're spewing coal dust. So as far as a solar farm or a wind farm, I'll take that over a coal plant any day.
I guess I'll add to that, in order to get to how much energy we're using right now, that's a lot of solar panels to be built. But if we can cut that energy usage in half, then that's more, less infrastructure in solar, and also more land that's left open. So,
how do you plan about cutting your energy in half, like Eau Claire and other cities?
Well, our plan isn't created yet. And I've given up on the expectation that we'll have one plan. But we're doing things like investing in alternative transportation infrastructure. So I think the city of Eau Claire has, no, I'm not going to claim that. I was going to say we had the most trails per capita, but I'm not sure that that's actually true. So it might be even Madison. I don't know. We have a lot of trails in Eau Claire, though, and a lot of bicycle infrastructure, a lot of bus infrastructure. We want to be instituting anti-idling policies, so policies that prevent carbon emissions from just idled cars. We want to be promoting things like urban agriculture and vertical gardening, incentivizing, making it easy for people to reduce our grass monoculture so that they're not spending so much fuel to mow it. Little things like that, where we can be instituting policies to chip away at our private and our public carbon emissions.
Can you discuss the place of hemp in any of this? We have several friends who are growing hemp now, and I'm reading about a lot of uses that can be made for hemp. Restore the land, oil in building materials, all kinds of things. Is that on your horizon, or anybody looking at that?
It hasn't been up till now, but I'm happy to start thinking about it, doing some research, and seeing how hemp can result in lower use of fossil energy. I'm sure there are many ways that can be done, and I do think that soon, even our legislature will start warming up to using hemp for lots of other uses, and so that should be on our on our research agenda for sure.
And I did get an email recently about a product out there where there is a concrete method where you sequester the carbon in the hemp and then it's used in the concrete mix. And concrete is a huge contributor to CO2 emissions. So interesting technology is probably to be coming.
I know that you can use hemp oil for fuel too. I don't know anything about hemp when it comes to clean energy professionally, but I do happen to have a friend who's an oil presser, and he just like a week ago sent me a video of a car running entirely on hemp oil. So there's something there. I really don't know what, but yeah. Yeah.
Has any attempts been made that you're aware of in your cities or in Wisconsin to ban single-use plastic and anything legislatively that anybody's tried to do? Because that to me would be like a really good thing to do.
There's currently a law in the books that prevents municipalities from regulating plastic auxiliary containers. So that's broad interpretation. That being said, the city of Madison is looking to draft an ordinance to regulate single-use plastic straws at sit-down restaurants. It's a small step, I admit, but that's where we can go, and hopefully we won't get preempted from that.
So in short, cities cannot do what you're saying, unfortunately.
Really? I think there.
Not in Wisconsin.
Not in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Because I think
It's a
there
state
are
law,
definitely
yeah.
ones where they put a tax on plastic bags.
Can't do it.
Even Chicago has done that. There's a
Yep.
tax, like 7 cents.
Illinois is
on
different.
paper, 5%, pardon?
Call your legislator.
There is a bill that was introduced to repeal that, but it's kind of stalling out in committee, if you know what I mean.
My question is about the city of Madison and their remote solar arrays or farms, and how they sell or purchase. They're purchasing SRECs, I assume. When they purchase the SRECs, is there a net savings or is it a net cost?
That's a very good question. So the question is, do SRECs constitute an expense or a savings? And the answer is it's an expense. And the reason for that is because there is no physical product that comes through with the SRECs. However, the cost on a kilowatt hour basis is very small. It's less than half a cent a kilowatt hour. So it really doesn't add much to the utility bill. Moreover, we were able to buy 25 years of it up front. And so because we did it that way, we were able to digest that, financially speaking, digest that expenditure. And so once it's done, it's then really no cost, and it gives us gives us the right to apply those credits to our usage all the way into practically 2045. Is that right? Yeah, 2045.
Yeah, the reason I asked is I wasn't sure if they were being purchased and resold or anything like that. Okay.
No. I mean, ideally, you would want the renewable investment to result in a savings. And you can do that, but there are the limitations that I just described regarding the utility service and a host of other factors that make rooftop solar one of many ways in which you can get to 100%. But so you lose out on the savings potential from the investment. On the other hand, you get a whole lot of renewable electricity that you can call your own.
Yeah, I've been living in the county for 30 years, and I've never been a customer of Alliant Energy because I've always produced and stored my own electricity. Now, I know that from when we started, it cost us like $6 per watt on a solar panel, and the last panel I bought, it was $1, so that's a huge reduction. But I also see and hear a lot about big improvements in battery storage and other ways to store that electricity. Do you foresee at some point a municipality scale system where you're producing and storing your own electricity so you don't have to deal with the utility, or use that as leverage maybe to get the utility to be more cooperative?
So Renew Wisconsin organizes a bike ride fundraiser every year. And we just had one earlier this month in the Fox Cities. And on our route, we passed a nature preserve, Gordon Bubolt's Nature Preserve, that has right now the state's only operating microgrid. You're talking about the interaction of self-generation and storage to do so in a way so that should something happen, that area or those customers can detach themselves from the grid and operate and power themselves with the stored electricity in the battery. That technology is coming, but the rules of the, are not yet accommodating of growth. So, for example, in that nature preserve, there's another building right next to the nature preserve headquarters. It's a Girl Scout office. And they wanted to be supplied and connected to the microgrid, but the local utility there, which is Wisconsin Electric, said, no, you can't have this customer providing electricity to that customer, even though they're right next to each other. So those restrictions have to be lifted in some way in order to accommodate further growth of microgrids. But from an engineering perspective, it does show a lot of promise.
And I guess I'm going to just add really quickly. So my URA about scope or scale, my other URA is about timeframes. And I would say that the question isn't necessarily the technology, because the technology is very promising. I would say that we don't have time to wait for a naturally occurring marketplace, commercialization, early adopter, R&D. Like, how are we gonna accelerate this so I can get that battery next year?
That's kind of like my question. I saw a place where they built a new city hall in Normal, Illinois, and it's got 20 electric pumping stations for cars. I don't see any in use yet, but they're thinking ahead, you know.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that's happening in the state.
Yeah, that's one thing that we're planning on investing with our $3 million over 5 years, investing in charging stations that are publicly owned, so anybody who needs to use them can.
And I would say at the state level too, the VW settlement that was out to be allocated towards EV infrastructure build out. There was a heavy lobbying campaign to not have that happen. They did succeed, but that's going to be a continual fight to ensure that we have plenty of EV infrastructure for everyone. State.
Can I kind of add to that we already have 6 EV public charging stations in the Baraboo area?
Wow.
So
Yay.
they're either publicly
That's
or
accelerated
privately
for sure.
owned. They're not city owned, but we do have some.
That's great.
And to add to mine, I see that Honda has a huge plant in this country that cannot keep up with the demand for hybrid and electric vehicles. So they're getting ready.
Yeah. You had mentioned, a couple of you had mentioned that transitioning transportation is a lot harder than doing electrical generation, and was wondering, what are you hearing from your constituents in terms of things that they want, and or what are your cities doing to really try to work on converting transportation?
So I guess To speak to the city of Madison, I think we're unique, and I definitely want Kate to follow up after I speak because it's probably a little different in Eau Claire, but we have a metropolitan area, right? People live in Madison, but they work in Verona, or they live in Fitchburg, but they travel to Madison for whatever reason. And so being that we have disparate, municipalities and government units, it would make a ton of sense if we could coordinate transit. And when I say transit, I love EVs, but I don't think the future vision is the Beltline congested, just no tailpipes, right? That's not the vision. So there is also a preemption for us to do a regional transit authority, which would allow us to allocate a 1 cent tax to go towards transit for everyone, right? To build it out. And so we're trying our best. We have expanded to Middleton and Sun Prairie with our bus metro, but we're having to fork over those funds, and it's really challenging when there's a lot of other resource needs. But I'll pass it over to Eau Claire for that.
Yes, there is a lot of demand for alternative transportation in Eau Claire. There are, I guess I'll say, there's some enthusiastic support, but a lot of, in a smaller community like Eau Claire, there's, I guess, a majority of people that aren't quite ready to give up their car, which is, as a city council member, it is difficult to kind of weigh, I know that a majority of my constituents don't support a full and robust transit system to replace their car. But, as a futurist and a visionary leader, I need to be considering how far can we go, even though maybe everyone doesn't support it now. Which is why we're in Eau Claire, we're investing in new hybrid buses and a totally new transit system, or a totally new transit transfer center. Our transfer center, just a little fun fact, was built to be a temporary facility. It didn't even have heat or bathrooms, but it's 30 years old now. And so for us, a big start is just making the transit system a place where people want to be. We're always chasing the choice riders, the people who don't necessarily need to ride the transit system, but like it better so they don't have to keep track of their car. And so because it's easier to do, easier to get places with. And so just making it easier for people to ride the transit so that it becomes something that they choose. I will say too that I think that transportation may be the hardest category to address because it might be the hardest category to collect data on as well. We don't exactly know how much people are using, and so it's hard to set goals around cutting that. But I think as far as transportation, just like anything else, it's going to be just as much about cutting the amount that we use as well as transferring to EV. So, yeah.
Yeah, could you talk about the work that's being done both to, I want to get at reducing energy use, and let's focus on buildings. And so you address that somewhat with the city-owned buildings, but what organizations and what efforts are the municipalities doing to reduce energy use in residential buildings and commercial buildings?
So the question is, what can municipalities do to cultivate and integrate more efficiency in single-family homes and multifamily dwellings? The codes that govern energy use of these buildings is set by the state, and state law does not permit local governments to impose or adopt stricter standards than what the state permits. So they're kind of handcuffed that way. They still have some tools that in particular spots, like for example, through tax incremental financing, a municipality can specify and also incentivize a more efficient building envelope and solar on the rooftop through that tax mechanism. But as far as setting rules that builders have to abide by, that's not, the state doesn't permit municipalities to do that sort of thing.
I will say that the city of Madison we have earmarked an increase in our sustainability fund for 21 and beyond to implement energy efficiency programming for both residential and commercial. However, I will have to say in our effort to do it in the past, we've been quite challenged. I mean, there's no real money in it, so it definitely has to be subsidized. And a lot of the practitioners, that it's not something that it's easy to find contractors to do, like a sweep of a neighborhood or something to that effect. But I do want to just do one more big shout out to Focus on Energy as our statewide energy efficiency program for residential, commercial, ag, school, government.
Hey, I wanted to point out that we have a couple students that actually led our Baraboo climate strike here tonight. And if they were to start an eco club at the high school, what would their next steps be, in your opinion?
Well. Okay, so first off, energy efficiency, right? So let's start benchmarking every building in your school district, right? Let's see how much money they're spending on energy that they could be using those monies for students and other resources for students. And then raise money for solar on your rooftop. It's something that we did at West High School in Madison, and that was something that parents, teachers, and kids got all involved in, and it was a wide success. Over $140,000 raised for solar on the rooftop. And then let's start looking at our waste stream. I actually was just at Cherokee Middle School and Leopold Elementary School earlier this week watching a attempt at recycling with kiddos of various ages wanting to go out to the playground as fast as possible. But there's a lot of waste stream that happens because if you think about it, it's a large institution and they're providing meals. And so there's a lot of single-use plastic. There's a lot of food waste. And so those are two big areas I would look into is that energy piece, both energy efficiency, renewables, then the waste stream as well.
Right.
I would add to that daily, that's the site of the most vehicle idling Monday through Friday.
I've thought that often, if we could get a citywide bus system for the school district, electric, it would probably save hundreds of cars sitting there like that.
So let me just add on to Stacie's response. Building energy efficiency into school districts is really a two-front process. On the one hand, you have the existing buildings with a myriad set of challenges and different building specifications that have to be addressed. If by chance the population of school-age children is growing and the community is thinking about a referendum to either add to the school or build a new school, there is no time like the referendum process to specify some very, very strict standards. Then you don't have to, you can do this on your own. The state doesn't have to get involved. And more importantly, you can actually design a building that could become something of a showcase. The school district of Oregon in Dane County just recently passed a referendum specifically to build a net zero energy school. That school will become occupied at the fall semester 2020, and you can look there for inspirations and examples of cutting edge technology and practices that will lead to basically a whole school not contributing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
So I'll add two more things. So Wisconsin Conservation Voters is, as we're asking cities to make commitments to 100% renewable energy, we're also asking school districts to make the same commitment. And we, in our toolkit that I mentioned that we're working on with Renew and the Sierra Club, there's information about school districts and how we can get that commitment made. I do believe that setting that vision for a school district and for this or any municipality and for the staff is important, so that they can kind of have that as their guiding principle. I'll also say that there's some really exciting projects across the country with Wisconsin conservation voters, like affiliates from different states. It's called Clean Buses for Healthy Niños. It's through our CHISPA program, and they're converting like entire school districts to completely clean energy buses, electric buses, for the purpose of like protecting the lungs of the students that they're serving, right? Not just for a clean energy and climate change perspective, but like for the immediate health of those children who are breathing in those fuels. So.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for this program. I came here from Fort Atkinson tonight because I've been giving some thought to the fact that we need a few troops to go out and talk to communities where people can get questions answered and broaden their perspective. So I appreciate this very much. I also hosted a solar group-wide program in Jefferson County last year and have put in an application to do another one this year. Because we have about 4 solar farms in Jefferson County that are currently being negotiated, and there is a lot of value in there. But I want to go back to the biodigesters and ask about the, you talked about manure digesters and also anaerobic digesters for food scraps and stuff. Would that displace some of the CAFO farms? People are having a hard time with them, and so CAFO farms are standing by ready to snap up that land. And I would much rather see that they go to solar farms than to the digesters, but does it still have to be trucked? One of the big complaints about the digesters is that you have to truck the waste.
So Wisconsin conservation voters we work on clean energy, but really our primary objective is working on clean water policy and as it relates to agriculture and also like lead piping. And I will say that there's some disagreement in the conservation community over digesters. I think there's a lot of people that will say that it could be part of a solution to CAFO manure and dealing with that CAFO manure so that it's not polluting our waters. I think that there are also a lot of people that would say that those digesters are far outside of the financial capacity of smaller farms and even a lot of CAFOs. They're just way too expensive. They also tend to break down a lot, and so they're not super reliable. And so I think when it comes to digesters, it's about, not putting all of our eggs in that one basket and seeing it as potentially one solution in certain situations, but certainly not our golden bullet. I think that when it comes to CAFOs, it's we don't actually have any more manure in the state of Wisconsin than we did, 30 years ago. It's that it's condensed in one place and it's being spread over the land irresponsibly. And so it's about policy change that will kind of bring it back to a more natural way of farming. Yes, and empowering the DNR to regulate the rules that we have. Yeah, thank you.
I would also say that at least in Dane County, we have a number of biodigesters. And the principal driver of those biodigesters was not to generate electricity, but rather to control manure runoff into our lakes. And with the digesters come the opportunity to separate the phosphorus out of the waste stream, and that phosphorus is really what's fueling the algae blooms and the undesirable lakeweed growth that we have in the Yahara lakes. So they can play a positive role, especially with farms that already exist. So it's not enabling the construction of new CAFOs. It's just addressing a problem that's already there. But these farms will eventually, these biodigesters will eventually stop generating electricity, and instead they will host gas cleaning equipment and gas compression equipment that will that take that fuel, and then it'll be trucked over to the Yahara landfill. You won't have manure in trucks. You'll have biogas in trucks, which is a lot cleaner and safer. And then at that point, that gas can be injected into an interstate gas pipeline, which is how you can capture those clean natural gas credits from the state of California.
Are those pipelines susceptible to damage and breaking like the Enron pipelines? Are they just as risky, or how are they different? Enbridge, sorry.
Enbridge. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. It's the interstate. I forget what company owns the one that runs past Yahara landfill, but there's an existing network of these pipelines, and new sources of gas can be easily injected into them.